Spider-Man might be the most beloved character on Earth. Sure, you've got Batman, you've got Rocky, you've got Harry Potter, but I don't know if there's a single character that you can name who has more worldwide love than the friendly neighborhood wall crawler that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko thought up back in the early 60s. And over the near 60 years he's been around, Spidey's had a lot of adaptations, from the fantastic original Raimi trilogy to the 70s Spider-Man that murdered people with Tommy guns. Yeah, that was a weird one. And that's not to mention the 90s animated series and Into the Spider-Verse, which in my opinion are the best on-screen adaptations of Spider-Man that we've ever seen. Spectacular fans are gonna really hate me after saying that. Spider-Man is a character that can work over so many different mediums, and no different from any other successful comic character, he's had his fair share of time in the video game spotlight. Although the Spider-Man license hasn't quite been as abused as Batman, Marvel and Sony have done whatever they could to capitalize on the webhead's popularity, whether with side-scrolling beat-em-ups in the 90s, the massively underrated 2000 game, the massively overrated Spider-Man 2 tie-in game, Web of Shadows, Shattered Dimensions, Web of Time, the list goes on and on. But after the mediocre TASM 2 tie-in game back in 2014, the Spider-Man gaming brand went quiet for a few years. That is until 2016, when we found out that Insomniac were working on a fully fledged Spider-Man PS4 exclusive, completely separate from any film or TV show counterpart. When we finally got Marvel Spider-Man 2 years later, it's safe to say that Insomniac had recaptured the magic that Rocksteady had created with Arkham Asylum, and had changed the way the gaming industry would look at Spider-Man forever. And despite me saying this dumb shit before I even played the game, and it's easily one of the most overrated games of all time in my opinion, it's safe to say that the adoration that this game garnered was more than well deserved, because this isn't just the best Spider-Man game of all time, this is the best superhero game of all time. At least, in my opinion. Where do I even begin with this game, man? I suppose the best place to start would be the start, the stunning opening cutscene that immediately established the fundamental understanding Insomniac had of this character. Panning through a small cluttered apartment, we see newspaper clippings, we see gadgets, we see energy bars and unopened letters, and we essentially get the origin story of Spider-Man shown to us, before finally we see Peter Parker, a man who we all know, a man who when he was just a kid was tasked with a responsibility unlike anything else, and a man who has a different fucking face depending on what version of the game you played. Regardless of that controversial recast though, it's hard to deny that this Peter Parker is both written and performed to absolute perfection, with Yuri Lowenthal proving skeptics wrong and bringing us arguably the definitive Peter Parker, who through a single decision at the end of this cutscene shows us exactly who he is. Pay his rent or deal with the gunfight at Wilson Fisk Tower, and of course to Peter it's not even a decision. It probably goes without saying that the most important aspect of anything Spider-Man related is webs and web swinging, and Sony couldn't have picked a better developer to perfect this. Before Spider-Man, Insomniac were mostly known for creating the fantastic momentum-based movement system in Sunset Overdrive, and here they bring a similar momentum-based system that's reminiscent of Spider-Man 2, but with the addition of gorgeous animations, many of which pay direct homage to the many films, TV shows, and comic swinging moments. Now, although the system has its flaws, some situational animations that have been nice, such as running along the ground or the inability to wrap webs around buildings, it was clear immediately to everyone that played it that it was easily the best web swinging system thus far. And similarly to the free flow combat system back in 2009, this web swinging mechanic laid a foundation for what will undoubtedly be massive upgrades in years to come. Oh, and Insomniac, if you're listening, which you're most certainly not, please, I beg you, please just steal Naughty Dog's rope physics from Uncharted 4. I know that game development isn't that simple, but just copy and paste it. Please, just steal the physics system, because it would make everything perfect. Aside from the movement though, there are two other major systems that make up the majority of the game, and if you've played any action-adventure superhero game, you know exactly what they are: combat and stealth. Two mechanics that are blatantly inspired by both the free-flow combat and Predator stealth that Rocksteady revolutionized with the Arkham games. But what sets Marvel Spider-Man apart is just that. You're playing as Spider-Man, and the gameplay reflects that, with a far quicker, somewhat more chaotic fight mechanic that relies far more on quick reflexes and dynamic combos as opposed to the heavy focus on gadgets that the Arkham games provide. Although, this game has gadgets too, and despite the fucking robots being a bit dumb, they're made up for by a variety of web types that you can chain together to send your enemies flying. Although, they really need to add a quick swap feature because scrolling through that weapon wheel every time really breaks up the momentum of fights. As for the stealth, it too utilizes the webs to a great extent, extent, but honestly, most of it comes down to simply waiting till an enemy is alone and then silently taking them out. And the mission design rarely allows for unique stealth opportunities, aside from occasionally luring your enemies into a web trap. The biggest downside of the stealth though, and something that I pray Insomniac remove in future entries, is the safe/danger mechanic, in which you can simply scan the room to immediately know if you'll be seen taking down an enemy. Not only does this make stealth mind-numbingly easy for everyone bar Stevie Wonder, but it also removes any kind of fear or atmosphere that a good stealth system should produce, as at no point do you really need to pay attention to enemies' line of sight, or anything they do for that matter. Oh yeah, and real quick, the best addition that Miles Morales made was the ability to re-enter stealth after you'd been seen. I would mention that, but they've already fixed it. We stand studios that actually take criticism and, you know, improve upon it. For the most part, the rest of the gameplay is made up of decently exciting QuickTime events, absolutely terrible puzzles, and the oh-so clowned on Mary Jane and Miles sections, which honestly, I don't mind. Sure, by the end game they get slightly tedious, but the first few stealth sections with the two supporting characters create a real tension and atmosphere, taking away the near limitless power of Peter and grounding the player in a normal person's shoes, reminding us exactly why the power Peter holds comes with so much responsibility. Speaking of supporting characters, holy shit did the writers get every single character in this game flawless. Well, almost every character. Miles Morales and his father Jefferson Davis are implemented into the story naturally and have a tragic yet perfect sub-story weaved in, setting up the next game fantastically. And then there's Aunt May, dear Aunt May, the queen holding Peter up through his darkest hours, the one person he can always go to, a woman loved by her community and always on the lookout to help those most in need. Do I even have to say more? Okay, I get it. There's an elephant in the room. Mary Jane is Lois Lane. Mary Jane in Marvel's Spider-Man is a good character. She is. Her chemistry with Peter is great, the arc she and Peter has is executed fantastically, and generally she's just a very solid character. But like I said, she's also Lois Lane. I don't fully understand the obsession the writers have had over the past few years with changing Mary Jane's profession, and in some cases all of her character traits. Far from home. Maybe it's because we all heard far too much of Kirsten Dunst screaming in the 2000s, but I would appreciate if someone outside of the comics could give us a slightly more loyal MJ adaptation. But then again, maybe that's just me. On the other side, you have the fantastic Rogues Gallery, which, if you know Spider-Man, is pretty huge and pretty iconic. Taking a similar path again as the Arkham games, Insomniac set this game in a world where Spider-Man, along with his enemies, are already long established, creating a slightly different dynamic to the villains in this game, and perfecting the Sinister Six in the process. Spider-Man at this point in his life runs into very few issues going about his business. He's experienced, he's been doing this for years. He can deal with a crazed, money-hungry maniac in a suit like it was an average Tuesday afternoon. Rhino, Scorpion, Vulture, Electro, at this point they don't act as real threats to Peter. He can handle them pretty swiftly. We see this Rogues Gallery established from the very first scene, and so when they do team up, it makes the moment we see Spider-Man defeated by them that much more intimidating, and makes them feel like a genuine threat. On top of that, you of course have Martin Lee, a tragic Jekyll and Hyde style character who we see try to get revenge for the death of his parents at the hands of Norman Osborn. Lee's a good man with a good heart, but vengeance consumes one half of his mind, and it leads him down a dark and terrible road. Another great man we see fall from grace thanks to Norman Osborn is of course Otto Octavius, who honestly I think is better here than he is in Spider-Man 2. Now hold on, don't hate me, I love Alfred Molina as well. Spider-Man 2 fans, don't despise me, He's great. He's great. Here though, I feel Peter and Doc's relationship is far more fleshed out. We truly see why Peter looks up to Otto so much, and we see that the two are genuine friends, which makes the fall from grace even worse to witness, especially since the player knows where Otto's headed. Also, having both of these villains motivated by the evils of Norman Osborn was the perfect way to set the Tycoon up as the big bad in a sequel down the road, adding more weight to the connection Peter already has to him thanks to his friendship with Harry, who's also a looming presence throughout the entire game and is finally brought to the forefront in the cliffhanger post-credit scene. Speaking of which, Marvel Spider-Man, like every superhero property these days, sets up numerous possible avenues for a sequel, but unlike a lot of recent media, it does it in a way that feels natural within the confines of the game's story. Whether it's Otto knowing Peter's identity, everything with Miles, a potential appearance from the Green Goblin, along with Venom. Oh, and there's also a bunch of references to other Marvel characters, but I don't think they're gonna go anywhere. Man, remember back in like 2019? When we thought we were going to get a whole Marvel interactive universe with Marvel's Avengers and Spider-Man and all that. That was cool. That was a cool time. didn't quite work out. To me, Marvel Spider-Man is the definitive Spider-Man adaptation, from the character himself to his rogues gallery and sidecast to the incredibly immersive gameplay. It does exactly what Arkham Asylum was able to do with Batman, and does even more with it. I mean, to be fair, it did come out like nearly a decade later, so, you know, it probably should have been better, but the point still stands. And although Arkham City, Origins, and Knight are all great in their own right, I honestly think they're all edged out by this game. Now don't get me wrong, the Arkham series as a whole still knocks Insomniac's work out the park, and it'll take a couple more sequels for them to fully catch up. But as an individual game, putting my Batman biases to one side and completely fucking ignoring Marvel's Avengers, I can honestly say that Marvel Spider-Man is the best superhero game ever made. LEGO Batman 2 fans are definitely going to be mad at me as well, but I'm used to people being mad at me by now. As always though, that is just my opinion, and I am very interested to hear yours. Make sure to leave it in the comments below. What's your favourite superhero game of all time? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know. Also, if you enjoyed the video, it would really help me out and really be appreciated if you could hit like, and if you're new here and want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe and turn post notifications on. That of course means hit the bell. Patreon links, Twitter links, Twitch links, Instagram links, all in the description below. And with all that being said, I've been Joe, aka Found a Scarab. Hope you enjoyed the video again, and I will see you in the next one. And yes, this review is 3 years late. Can I call it a retrospective? I mean, give me more views, right?